Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The 100 and Orphan Black. Starting off with The 100, we have Pike and Kane coming upon the to kind of meet Antari. To turn Pike over, but, they don't know about, they come upon this situation, they see, which is incredible, you see all these, tree crew people just, hung up on crosses with, their hands, spikes through their hand, and just the streets are covered in blood. It's, a brutal looking scene, and then you have Thelonious, walking out with Antari, and it's just both of them are kind of what's going on? And then, Pike's oh, it's this whole chip situation. And then basically essentially asks Pike as well as Kane to take him. And basically he takes Pike and sends him off and does the same thing to Kane. Granted, when it comes to Pike, he put Pike in the same cell as Murphy and Indra was slicing at him she was going to get her revenge, but Murphy kind of talked her down because he was we need Pike's help, because she's what do you want more, your revenge, or do you want to save your people? She's both, but she's I'll hold off on my revenge until we get my people free. So it's Pike's definitely going to die. I mean, I don't know. I feel there ain't no escaping what he's done. He's going to get his. He is going to die, but it's going to be after this whole situation is all said and done and dealt with. And you had the Kane situation where it broke my heart, because it's they try that thing. They try to manipulate him with Abby, bringing her in there a little. I think she was a little beat up just to kind of prove a point. It's oh my God, where's Clark? And Allie's telling her just keep kind of pushing it, and he's just I don't know, and she keeps pushing onto him, and then she even goes as far as trying to seduce him, making out with him hard, but Kane doesn't fall for it. He's you took the chip, didn't you? And then they hoist him up on one of the crosses too, and it's just so painful, especially because they show you a camera angle of the nail below the board, under on the other side of him, and you see it going through, it's dripping heavily with blood. It's just ugh. And then basically he was tell us where Clark is, tell him when they are, or you take the chip. And he's no, you just have to kill me. I was oh my God. I was no, don't tell me we're about to see Kane die. I don't want to see Kane die. We just lost Sinclair last episode. We lost Lincoln. It's just people have been dropping dead like crazy. Before that, we lost Lexa. It's just too many people are dying. Don't take Kane too. And it's no, he's I'm not going to kill you. Points a gun at Abby. He's no, don't do it. And it's just Allie really knows how to manipulate people, because she did the exact same thing with Raven when it came to Abby. It's the only way she can get people to take the pills is the chips is basically by making people hurt. And Raven slit her wrist, and that's why Abby took the chip. And in this regard, it's because Kane, he's in love with Abby, so she, even if it wasn't, he'd still care a lot about her. But sadly, he's under control now. It's oh man, Kane, fought so hard not to be under control, just like Abby did, but it's just futile. Apparently, Allie did admit that she is finding there is 3% resistance. So I'm thinking she's saying at least 3% of people fight them on it. I'm guessing that's what all those tree crew people who are on those crosses, I guess they're all people that denied her. I thought, I was oh, is that something Antari herself just did just, because she was herself? Or I guess that's something she did because of the chips, because now even, a lot of the grounders are under that spell too, because obviously their commander Antari is telling them to take it, so they're going to follow her command. Granted, there are some who didn't, and I'm guessing that's who they are up there. So it's just man, don't know where that situation's going. At the same time, this episode, we got a very interesting kind of flashback. It's kind of supposed to take place, around season one-ish, during the first episode of season one. Essentially, it showed Pike being brought in by Kane, Abby, and Thelonious. Basically, he was to teach the 100. This is before they left to survive on Earth. I mean, granted, they don't know that they're going to Earth and they're not supposed to. So he's basically supposed to teach them in 2 weeks. He said like, oh, I can prepare them in 4 months, but the one is like, you prepared them in 2 weeks. Eventually, Pike ended up figuring out what it was. I mean, because essentially, like what the situation was that the Ark was dying and that they were kind of their last hope. He's like, but the fact of the matter is you're sending kids. I mean, your kid is a part of this too. He's like, you're sending them there to die. Is that what you want? He's like, no, it's not. Essentially, they're their last hope. They're leaving scientists on board so they can make sure that they, keep the Ark alive for as long as possible so they can find out if Earth is inhabitable so they can bring other people down before the Ark dies. But obviously, if you've watched the show and you've seen everything up to now, we already know how that situation played out. But essentially, it was kind of a different side to Pike. We kind of got to see Pike before we've come to know him as he is now, the person you hate and detest the most. It's like, granted, it's because of his experience that's made him, it's because of who he, like, no one in the show is who they were before they came to the ground. No one. Even Bellamy is nowhere near who he was before, because he was kind of a more self-centered guy, more concerned about himself. Granted, he looked out for his sister, but after that, he just kind of looked out for himself. But it's like he became a leader. He actually legitimately became a leader, not just the leader he was in the first season, telling people just to do whatever they want to. He legitimately took over, especially when him and Clark started actually working together and seeing eye to eye. They led their people and protected them and cared for them. But it was kind of interesting seeing that side of Pike. But then basically, time was running out. And so Thelonious is like, do whatever you need to make them like, because prior to this, they were all taking it as a joke. They weren't taking it seriously. But then like in the last class, he basically started beating the crap out of Murphy. Essentially, it was to basically fight back, to like, do whatever it takes to survive. Essentially, he wanted to kind of ingrain that in him. And he was beating the crap out of Murphy. Everyone in the classroom was flipping up. First, he was slapping Murphy a little bit, started dragging him around, throwing him against the wall, slamming against the table, and it's just like at some point one person grabbed the pipe and knocked him over the side of the head, and it's just like, crap, wow, dude. It was like a hard lesson that he wanted to ingrain in them before, because like I said, he couldn't let them know. Even though this was the last class, he still couldn't let them know ahead of time what they were going to do, because he couldn't take the chance that they'd go off and warn people and tell them what's going on. And essentially, this was kind of our first time really seeing like a peek into the Pike we currently know. It was like a little bit of a peek. Granted, he just, when forced into a situation he doesn't necessarily want to be in, we see that kind of darker side come out of him. But granted, I guess that could be arguably said about anyone. But another part of this episode was them following the map. Jasper, Octavia, Clark, and Bellamy following Lincoln's map, and they end up finding what they believe to be, now I'm not really understanding this 100%. They end up finding a graveyard, and they essentially start thinking like, okay, Luna's dead too. Like, what I'm thinking is, were they going there thinking it was a village, or at one point was it a village but it was turned into a graveyard? I'm thinking it was already a graveyard, but they were expecting to find people there, a village there. But definitely that's the case. They were expecting to find a village, but they ended up finding graves. So they even started thinking maybe Luna was dead. But they end up finding out you set up a fire and use certain twigs, and it turns the flames green, and that creates a signal to let them know to come, specifically a signal to Luna. We also had, Bellamy still dealing with the whole Octavia situation, and essentially Octavia still hasn't forgiven him, and he just kind of walks away after she's like, because essentially she's like, she can't even look at him without thinking about Pike putting a bullet through Lincoln's head. And he's like, it wasn't me that did it. He's just like, but you still played a role in it. Everything happened because of you. He's like, I tried to help you, but you didn't want to listen. You didn't even want to take my help. And he just kind of walks away. And, Clark kind of talks to him, and he's just like, I've lost her forever. But she's like, just give her time. She knows you didn't have anything to do with Lincoln dying. She's just, honestly, truth be told, she's mad, and rightfully so. Yes, Bellamy made mistakes, but he is trying to make up for them. And it's just like, she can't 100% blame you for Lincoln. Lincoln dying wasn't your fault, because you tried your best to try and stop the whole thing from happening. His blood isn't on your hand. And then basically she's like, you kind of have to, it's not just Octavia's forgiveness you need your own forgiveness. You need to forgive yourself for what you did. And he's just kind of like, it's hard, because even Clark said it herself, like he's not the only one looking for forgiveness, because she wants, she has to forgive herself for what she did too. But it seems like I don't know if either one of them ever will. Even Bellamy admits he's like, a lot of stuff he did was because he was mad at Clark for leaving for the longest time. But he's like, I don't want to be like that anymore. She's like, it's okay. We just have to work together. With this situation as it is, the only way we're going to survive is if we work together. And they kind of hug it out, and it's just like, oh man. I know it's something stupid that's always been in the back of my mind since I think it kind of popped up in season 1, especially when Clark and Bellamy started getting closer in season 1. It's like in the back of my mind, I was like, they kind of make a cute couple. They make an interesting couple, Bellamy and Clark. I don't know, just because it's sad and twisted to say this, but both of them are currently single. Both their girlfriends are dead, so. It's really messed up, especially when you think about Clark's love life, man. Her first Finn, now Alexa, so I don't know. But they ended up meeting with the people that are connected to Luna, and ended up actually meeting her firsthand. And they're like, okay, here's the flame, use it. But she's kind of like, nope, I'm not going to become the new commander. It's just like, because Clark was telling her, you don't have to lead the way Lexa led, or any of the previous commanders led, lead the way you believe. But she still turned it down. Like, they were kind of pausing, kind of keeping that like dramatic atmosphere. But I was like, she's going to say no. I know she's going to say no. I can already tell. If she really cared about being commander, she would have came back long before now. But maybe she had her own reasons for being away for so long. Granted, they still haven't explained the whole situation to her, but they were, because they were in a what's that called, a shipping container, and they end up rushing out, and they find themselves on, I don't know what that's called, an oil platform out in the middle of the ocean is what it is, I guess. I don't know what the proper word for that is. So very interested to see where we go with this. Next episode, we've got Kane under control. We've got Indra, Murphy, and Pike, as well as those other grounders, in that prison, trying to decide like what they're going to do about the current situation. And we also have this situation with them and the group in Luna trying to like convince her to become the new commander, because if they don't get that AI in her, like there's no stopping Allie, and just every second that goes by, more and more people are under Allie's control. She's literally got 2 armies under her belt already. She's got all of Arcadia, and she's got the grounders too. So it's like like time is running out. They've got to do something now if they want to stop Allie, and they're going to need her help. So I'm just curious how they're going to go about convincing her. Now moving on to this week's episode of Orphan Black. A lot of stuff went down. We end up meeting Felix's biological sister, which that was kind of interesting introduction. Sarah meets her, and she's like, "Oh, you're a drug, you're a drug. Are you the drug dealer?" It's like, "Okay, what do you have or whatever." Felix shows up and introduces her. It's like, "Oh, you're Sarah. You're not a drug dealer, are you?" She's like, "Not anymore." She's like, "Oh, that bums out." Because Sarah had went to her about the thing that's that bug machine thing that's in her mouth, just to talk to him about the situation. But Felix is like, no, like, it's just like, come on, Felix, like this whole situation, like, I need your help. He's like, basically, you're only here, you're mad because your buddy, your sidekick isn't there for you. And she's just kind of like, piss off, and he's just kind of like telling her to piss off too. So it's interesting seeing that fallout, because it's like we kind of saw the beginnings of that last episode, because he's all, like I said, he's kind of grown to feel like he doesn't really belong in this world anymore, because he kind of feels like he's got caught up in his sister and Mrs. S's drama, because like I said last time that Mrs. S and Sarah are connected, and it's like, okay, like, what's his place in all this? Like, Sarah's finding out more and more where she's coming from, and that kind of inspired, I guess, Felix to kind of, because he's kind of trying to, I guess, with everything that's happening in Sarah's life, he doesn't want it to kind of control his life. So he kind of wants to find his own place. So, finding out about his family. It's an interesting development. It's sad to see them fall apart, because, Felix has been her, like, go-to person throughout this whole situation that she could rely on. And now she feels like, oh shit, like, the person she's closest to just kind of like, in her mind is kind of just up and abandoned her, kind of. We end up finding out a little bit more about Felix and his sister apparently. Apparently, she was like a lawyer or something at one point, but there's kind of like a disbarment issue, is kind of what he said, something like that. And we end up finding out that Felix, his dad, well, their dad, ended up having an affair with a dancer or something. That was Felix's mom. Apparently, he didn't really get to know her. She died when he was super young, so. And apparently her mom knew about the affair. It's something, essentially the whole thing with Felix, it came out with her, when their dad was on her deathbed, he kind of, I guess, told her mom and her about it. Granted, she initially knew, his wife knew about the affair, he didn't know about Felix though. And, you know, she kind of brings up like, oh, what does your family think about it? She's like, honestly, I don't care what they think about it. I'm kind of doing my thing. It's like they got their things, I've got mine. And, you know, it came up in the episode. It's like Sarah was like, how do you know she's really your sister? She could be a neo-illusionist or whatever. So it's like, it'd be kind of interesting. What if that is the case? What if she's faking it hard? Or maybe what if she is his sister, but she's still connected to neo-illusion? You never know. Essentially, Sarah ended up meeting that guy again. The one who's connected to MK, the one who showed her the video of the guy, like the thing once his tap with ended up exploding. I thought Home Dude was dead. The dude from that video, I thought he died. No, he didn't die. It erupted and did its thing, but it didn't kill him apparently because, you know, Sarah ends up trying to track him down in this episode. She did kind of ask him, like, what does he think? Like, you know, what is his purpose? He's like, he can only theorize. He's like, they could have literally put it anywhere else in the body, but they chose the mouth. He's like, only reason he can kind of think of because it's the closest to the brain. Cosima couldn't figure out like exactly what it was or its purpose. She basically has to get one before she can really understand what to do with it. And that kind of gets Allison and Donnie thinking, like when they're on over the phone, because basically Donnie was in her mouth searching for one. I love it every time he kept messing up and poking her, and she was almost vomiting. You can hear her gagging. But then she was with Kasim, like, you know, she's kind of giving him the eyes about like, she's like, do you think, you know, all these are inside neo-illusionists, right? And the moment she said that and kind of started giving Donnie, so I'm like, freaking Leaky. I was like, you're gonna dig up his body? It's like, yep. And they're just standing there in the garage, or yeah, I think it's their garage, and they're just looking at it, and they're just like, okay, we're really gonna do this. And I love when they dig up the body, just like how they just like how quick and just like gagging and almost about to vomit they are. It's just, I forgot what was it that Donnie said. I thought it was so freaking hilarious. It was like, it smells like hot kind of wet garbage or something like that. He was saying, it's just like, I just loved it. Especially when they ended up peeling it back and you see Leaky's like all decayed body. It's just ugh. God. I love that, cause they kind of didn't let, Helena into what they were doing. Cause basically Helena was like, oh, I can help you. She was kind of like, oh, we don't need your kind of help. And she kind of gave him a look and he's just like, sorry. But because, you know, Helena's got her special way of helping. She ended up talking to Sarah in this episode, which is kind of nice. They haven't talked in a little while. She's like, I'm trying to get a hold of you. And it tells her the good news about having the twins. And it's basically, she was like, I don't want my babies to grow up like me, you know, being in her situation. She wants her babies to grow up, you know, happy and be together. Unlike her and Sarah weren't together. She wants her babies to grow up because she's like, they'll have each other like we have each other. And it's just like, oh, that's so beautiful. I love you, Helena. It's like, you're a little oddball, but you're still amazing. And I love you. You're so adorable. It's just like, sisterly love is a beautiful thing. But then, you know, that was really sweet. And I love that we have basically some cops showing up because essentially they're looking into the death of those three people. It was that guy, it was that drug dealer guy and his niece, as well as one of his henchmen. The ones that were working with Allison to, with our campaign. Essentially, she was working, you know, selling drugs for them. And basically, you know, they took Helena's, the tank she had her eggs in, and basically Helena got pissed. I forgot what exactly went down, but Helena basically massacred all of them. Essentially, some cops came looking into that situation, and it's just Helena was the one that answered the door, so she had to pretend to be Allison, and Donnie was there too, trying to pretend to be the husband. He came in all dirty and everything. It's like, I gotta go clean up. And essentially, they were sitting there. He was trying to answer everything, but, you know, the guys are like, okay, like, your wife can actually answer for us. And you know, it's like a little suspicious. And then Helena answers some stuff about like all the different people that were connected to Allison's campaigning, like the person who drove the truck and stuff like that, yada yada yada. And Donnie, you know, ends up asking Allison later on, because they ended up BSing their way through it. So I don't know. I feel like it's going to be interesting to see like if that comes back up later on in the episode. I love, because the fact is that happens at the exact moment that they're digging up Leaky's body. I love it. It's just like the timing is just perfect. It's like perfect from a show perspective. In their situation perspective, it's just like that sucks. It's like they have the worst timing all around. Donnie did bring up an interesting thing. It's like, how did Helena know that? And, you know, Allison attributed it to being like, oh, she's an assassin, so she probably, you know, did a lot of recon and knowed all this information. To me, it's not the case, but I think it'd be very interesting if we end up finding out it's because she has a connection to all of them, not just Sarah, but to all of them. Maybe all the clones secretly kind of have a connection mentally, so they kind of know stuff that they shouldn't know that only other clones know. Like I said, probably not the case, but that'd be kind of cool if that was the case. But I think it's highly unlikely. One of my favorite parts, another favorite part of mine, because I just love Donnie and Allison. I just love the fact is that Donnie got brought into this, like, you know, last season. And it makes the dynamic about everything so much more interesting. Not that it wasn't interesting before, but it changed. It turned into a whole new dynamic between them. And it's just like he's part of, you know, he's in on Clone Club, and he's kind of get caught up in this situation. And I love the fact this when he had to break it down to Cosima, it's like, yeah, you know, he's kind of beating around the bush. It was kind of a rainy night. My windshield wipers weren't really working that well. She's like, Allison's like, Donnie. She's like, yeah, I killed Leaky. And Cosima's like, you killed Aldous Leaky? He was like, yeah, because essentially they were, like I said, they were getting the thing for her so she could study. And he was like, essentially like, yeah, but it's kind of, I forgot what the word Allison used to describe the situation in his mouth, and Donnie just lost it again. And just Cosima just kind of like, whoa, okay, I can't believe you killed Leaky. That's crazy. Another thing in this episode we had was, because basically Sarah was over at Art's house while Art was looking for the guy from the video. And you see Sarah sitting there, she's watching the video and seeing Paul. There was like 2 scenes of it. And then you see her, she even looks at the one where Beth had the gun to Paul's head, and she's just there. She's like got tears in her eyes. It's just like, oh, it's so heartbreaking because she really liked Paul. She really cared for him, and it's just like seeing that, just a reminder that he's not there anymore. I mean, granted, it was probably hard. Was that last episode? Yeah, definitely last episode when she had to go through their apartment. That was probably hard. She didn't seem like she was as affected. She did kind of seem for a second like she kind of phased out a little bit when she was looking around, but it's just like this. I guess it just hit her even harder now. Just seeing his face, you know, there in that situation, it was just like moving around an empty apartment. You know, the memories were there, yeah, but it's like now you're just like seeing him. So we also had Art confronting that guy who's definitely connected to the Neo-Lucianists, because he's like, you came visiting Bev's house. He's like, oh yeah, I kind of had to look into make sure she was okay and everything. And Art's like, oh yeah, thank you. It's like, definitely meaning, you know, Art's going to be keeping an eye out for him now too. And a very interesting thing, Kira was acting weird in this episode. There was that beginning part where she was playing with that dude, playing that game, and all of a sudden she kind of zoned out and she just like knocked the whole board thing off. It's just like this whole situation with her mom. I don't know, she seems like, in the beginning she seemed more okay with everything, but it's like, you know, since the new season, it just seemed like, at the beginning was like, she just kind of was pissed at her mom about this situation. Granted, you can't really blame her because she's a little girl missing time with her mom. It's like she knows her mom's dealing with all this stuff, but you know, she still misses having her mom around. But now it seems like there's something else, because Kira's always seemed special because she knows things that she kind of should. Like, for instance, the first time she met Allison, because Allison was disguised as her mom, she was looking at her and she was like, you're not my mom. And she's like, she knew immediately. And then when Sarah came back, she's like, it's me, Monkey. She's like, I know. It's like she saw through it. It's like from the very beginning she was special, but it's just like, I don't know, especially when she talks to Cosima later on. She's like, I had a dream. She was like, you guys were burning Mom. And she's like, you and the other aunties were burning Mom. She's like, you know we'd never do that. Yeah, she's like, but y'all didn't have any choice. She was changing. It's like, what does that mean? Does that mean the thing inside of her is going to change Sarah? It's like, what is Kira's situation? What does she know? What is she? I mean, granted, she's special in her regard because she's the daughter of a clone, because, you know, Sarah's the only, well, now Helena too. But so far at this point in time, prior to Helena giving birth, Sarah was the first clone to like actually have children, biological children. Everyone else, especially because Allison's situation, kind of had to adopt. So it's just like, what's going on, and what does that mean? Like, will Sarah change? Is that something that's definitely going to happen, or is that just like, I don't know? That little girl is special, and I'm just so curious to find out like what makes her special. Like, what is her deal? Like, does she have some kind of like higher plane connection to the clones? Like what I was saying about the clones having a connection to each other. Maybe she actually has one to them. I legitimately have no idea what to make of that. Also in this episode, we have Rachel. We kind of see her for the first time, and apparently her nurse is a freaking Castor clone. That was kind of interesting. I ended up seeing something in between the break about how the actor who plays the Castor clones, how he was talking about the fact is that this character was a little different from the rest of his, because the rest of his clones had a military background. This one he wasn't. It's just kind of, he even, he's like, I have no connection to my brothers, like, but he doesn't feel the same way about his brothers the way Rachel feels about her sisters, because in a sense Rachel kind of hates her sisters, but he kind of doesn't hold the same contempt for his brothers. At least I don't think he does. Apparently it seems like because I kept wondering who that lady was. I couldn't remember, and then she was like, "Oh, you're using my last name." I was like, "That's right. She's Rachel's mom." Yeah, she faked her death because her dad was so sure that the Neolutionist killed her. But no, she's not. She's not dead. It wasn't by the Neolutionist hands either, because the fact is she works with Neolutionists. I don't know necessarily if she's the head of Neolutionist, but Neolution. I keep saying Neolutionist. Moving on. But the fact of the matter is that she kind of has a rocky relationship with her mom, because her mom kind of abandoned her and is doing all the, the situation she put her and her dad through. She ends up finding out that the little girl, because obviously the little girl that's with her, Charlotte, is a clone, because she looks just like, because the only person we've seen so far as a little girl amongst the clones is Rachel. We've never seen any pictures or any videos of Allison or the others when they were little, but we've seen video of Rachel when she was a little kid, the videos of her parents, and it's a little, obviously she's a clone, but it seems like she is actually a clone specifically of Rachel. Which that whole situation kind of Rachel kind of went off on her mom, and her mom was just kind of like, "Oh, you're a failure, you're a mistake, all this and that," just kind of being a horrible mom and walking away. Because apparently, I kind of didn't really get the context of it, but apparently. That Castor was apparently raised by her. I didn't really catch that, but apparently that's the case. Like, apparently she raised that Castor kid, but it's just like, okay, but you couldn't raise Rachel. That's what upsets her more about this situation. You took time to raise him, but you left me and dad behind. I was kind of raised on my own. That she's like, I had to be raised by Leaky. So I was just kind of like, oh, she's like, eventually we ended up finding out what the Neolutionist's true goal is. They are trying to create the perfect human. They're trying to make humanity perfect. The next step in evolution is to make humanity perfect, essentially. That's what their ultimate goal is. And I was wondering about it because it eventually came up in the episode. It's like, apparently she had wrote on one of the paintings, her and Charlotte are painting, and she left a message saying like, "Did you get my message out?" And Charlotte was like, "Yes." I was like, "What's the message?" Eventually we found out that was to I guess his name is Ferdinand. I don't remember what group he's a part of. He was connected to the group last season. But whatever the case may be, I don't know what it was called, and it doesn't really matter. Home dude shows up again. He was kind of, he kind of ended up meeting with Mrs. S first, but then he ends up showing up when Sarah went to meet that dentist lady to try and get the thing out of her mouth, but it ends up turning out that she's a Neolutionist too, and was just like, "Oh, I'm gonna hold this until my colleagues get here." But Ferdinand got there first, and he slit her throat, which was pretty brutal. I won't lie to you, that whole situation with the thing in her mouth, I was like the hook in her mouth, holding on to it, because she's like, if you move, it could activate, and that'd be a pretty bad situation. I was like, it kind of made me cringe the whole time. I was like, oh God, be perfectly still, Sarah. We don't want that thing to go off. But then, especially when she was like, oh yeah, she's like, I had no idea you were a part of the experiment too. But then, like I said, Furman came and slit her throat and informed Sarah the fact is that Rachel's mom is still alive. So, really crazy episode. Really interested to see where we go from here. But that's about all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.